No way, I was shocked when Mom passed, but meeting Lily here, those sad memories turned into good ones. Really, that makes me happy. As I was about to enter the waiting room, I was startled by the voices of a man and woman coming from inside and stopped in my tracks. Cracking the door open a bit, what do I see but John and a young woman, stark naked and embracing each other. Lily, I love you.
Aww.
You say that, but you actually prefer your wife, don't you? Lily, the woman referred to, tried to coax the truth out of John in a cajoling tone. No way, that one, she's just a housekeeper. I just married her because I couldn't be bothered with raising kids or anything, she was just convenient. Otherwise, who would marry someone so ugly? Hearing John's laughter, anger welled up from the pit of my stomach. John, I can't be with you anymore. You'll definitely regret making me angry. My name is Mary. I'm 39 and I work at an advertising agency. As most people know, advertising is an incredibly demanding field. Because of this, from my first job out of college until I turned 30, I was so focused on work that I hardly had any time to think about my personal life. Around the time I turned 30, I started thinking it was about time to get married. My colleagues, who joined the advertising agency with me, had somehow found time for romance, and one by one got married when they reached the right age. Feeling like I was lagging behind, for the first time in my life, I decided to try something called a singles mixer. The singles mixer I attended was limited to those in their 30s and 40s. At 30, I was the youngest participant, which allowed me to talk to several men, surprisingly. I wouldn't call myself ugly, but I've never been the type to be called cute or beautiful by those around me. So, I was genuinely surprised and pleased that so many people showed interest in me. At the mixer, I met a man named John. He was a classmate of mine, previously married, with a 9-year-old stepson named Chris. Though I was surprised he had a 9-year-old son at 30, John was always smiling and treated me kindly. He's been working at a gas station since graduating high school. If someone like you were his mom, I think my Chris would be really happy. Seeing John smile like that, I couldn't help but feel a flutter, despite my age. Would you like to exchange contact information? Before I knew it, I was the one asking John for his details. I had never before taken such a bold step with a man, so I was surprised at my own forwardness. Yes, of course, I look forward to it. After successfully exchanging contact information with him, we kept in touch after the mixer and went on a few dates. During our dates, John was always a gentleman, practicing ladies first. When John confessed his love for me after our third date, I was so happy I could have jumped for joy. And that's how we officially became a couple. Dating John was like reliving the sweet and sour days of youth, filled with enjoyable times. John proposed to me around 10 months after we started dating. Since we were both looking for marriage, the dating period felt just right, and we were eager to marry as soon as possible. Yes, I'd love to, thank you. While hugging John, who had just proposed, I savored the happiest moment of my life. Yes, that was the pinnacle of happiness in my life. Unaware of the hell that awaited after marrying John. Agreeing to marry John meant I was going to meet his son, Chris, for the first time. When I greeted Chris at John's house, he observed me closely, then looked down and fled to his room.
Oh no.
Does he dislike me? No, it's okay, he's still in elementary school, and suddenly being introduced to a new mom is just confusing for him. Give it some time, he'll warm up to you. I see, that makes sense. Convinced by John's words, I decided to take my time building a relationship with Chris. The next day, we went to greet John's family at his childhood home. We had already greeted my parents. John had explained that his father had passed away a few years ago, leaving his mother on her own. Nice to meet you, my name is Mary, John has been very kind to me, I look forward to getting to know you. As I bowed my head slightly, my new mother-in-law began to size me up, observing me as if appraising my value. She was flashy in appearance, adorned with what are known as high-end brands, sporting expensive watches and jewelry. I could tell at a glance that she was a person of high pride. Oh dear, well, you're quite the average young lady, aren't you? Not particularly beautiful, but not ugly either. Well, I guess you'll do as Chris's mother, won't you? I couldn't believe my ears when those were the first words she uttered. While not overtly hostile, the disdain dripping from her words weighed heavily on me. The fact that these were her first words to me made it all the more unbelievable. Mom, come on, that's not right. Even John seemed to find it odd and disagreed with her, yet he was smirking for some reason. Oh, my apologies. Well, we'll be living together starting next week, so let's get along. Wait, living together? I was baffled again by my mother-in-law's statement. Yes, didn't John tell you, living together is a condition of the marriage? I looked to John for help, but he just ignored my plea and casually said, oh, I forgot to mention that. We'll need to buy a bigger house since ours is too small. I'm counting on your help with the mortgage payments. John nonchalantly declared something considerably outrageous, as if it were nothing. What is going on here? Without being able to sort out my feelings, I left his family home. Swept up in the forceful approach of John and his mother, I found myself moving into a new house with them, as prepared by John, after we got married. The house was a new single-family home, and I was surprised that we had bought a new house even before we got married. Wow, what a big house. Chris's eyes lit up as he went off to explore every corner of the new home. It's a large, multi-generational home, but I wonder how much the mortgage is. I was too scared to ask right away. This looks comfortable. Well then, I'll take the biggest room over here. The room the mother-in-law chose was a 12-to-Tommy-sized Western-style room, the largest in the house. Moreover, it was on the first floor and was the room I had wanted to use, which left me a bit surprised. Listen, that room, well. As I tried to protest, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply and said in an intimidating tone, "What, do you have a problem with that?" No, not at all. Overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's domineering presence, I felt myself shrinking. Hey, I'm hungry, hurry up and make some food, lady. Chris yelled his demand from a distance. Being called lady for the first time took me aback. Chris, it might take some time to get used to, but I'd like you to call me Mom. Shut up, lady, just hurry up. Contrary to our first meeting, Chris now boldly repeated if lady, as if to spite me. Hey, why don't you say something too? I turned to John again for help, but all he said was, well, you're probably not used to it yet. Plus, from Chris's point of view, I'm an old guy, and you're an old lady, right? Never mind that, Mary, I'm hungry too, so hurry up and make us some dinner. I was taken aback by my MIL's request. What? Now that we're living together, you'll be making meals for everyone, right? Oh, this is great. Now I don't have to do housework ever again. Wait a minute, can't we share the household chores? After all, I usually get home later than John. You're not working right now, are you? Yes. My work hours are much longer than John's. I leave for work at 8 a.m. and get home around 9 p.m. During the busy season, it's not unusual for the day to turn over while I'm still at work, leaving me swamped every day. In contrast, John can almost always leave on time. As for my mother-in-law, she lives solely off the survivor's benefits from my father-in-law. I can't help but think she could at least help out with the housework. Really now, don't you have any compassion for the elderly? I can't move around like the young folks. Even a short walk tires me out, and yet, you're suggesting I do the housework. What an awful daughter-in-law you are. My mother-in-law exaggerated her reaction to the utmost, clinging to John as she spoke. I was so dumbfounded, I couldn't say a thing. Even John should be helping with the chores, but he acts as if he's unaware. Hey, Mom's right, I bought this great house for us, so the least you could do is help out around the house. He says he bought us a nice house, but in the end, it's my earnings that are paying off the mortgage, isn't it? John's reasoning is so flawed, I dread to think about our future life together. Since we moved into the new house, I've come to realize that John, his mother, and Chris have been treating me like a slave. Listen, lady, this curry is way too spicy to eat. I'm bringing a coworker home tomorrow, so make sure you clean every nook and cranny, will ya? Well, Mary, can't you even serve a drink to your husband who comes home tired from work? You're such a failure as a wife. And so, a constant stream of complaints about me pervaded the house. I can't possibly meet all your demands, I'm busy with work, you know. Even when I stand up for myself, all my family does is give me cold stares. Living this married life, I feel just like Cinderella, bullied by my stepmother and sisters. When I got married, this wasn't what I had in mind. Where did that kind John go? I was drowning in despair, fighting back the tears that welled up. 9 years have passed since then, bringing us to today. I'm still treated as an outcast in my own home, enduring daily snide remarks from my family. Lately, John's been coming home late, increasing the time I spend with his mother and Chris. I don't know if that's the reason, but they seem to take every opportunity to torment me. Chris has become a college student, and his snide comments have turned more insidious than before. Is Dad coming home late because you're not attractive enough for him? Probably, maybe he's cheating on you somewhere, wouldn't put it past him. My mother-in-law and Chris would deliberately have such vulgar conversations loud enough for me to hear. Pretending not to listen, I was preparing breakfast for the next day. If only Mary would leave this house, we could live here so comfortably as a family. A stranger living in such a fine house should be grateful. Chris burst into laughter at my mother-in-law's words. I was trembling with anger. Who is this stranger that cooks for them every day? I wanted to retort back to my mother-in-law, but knowing it would only bring more sarcastic remarks, I held back. As for John, he would come home late at night, often drunk, and I ended up spending time taking care of him. Don't you think you're drinking a bit too much? Maybe you should cut back on the alcohol a little. When I cautioned him, John glared at me with a frightening look. Shut up, I'm working hard every night until late, let me drink as much as I want. His eyes were bloodshot as he spat out these words, and I couldn't bear to look directly at him. Sighing, I helped John out of his clothes and brought him a change of clothes. I wonder how much longer these days will continue. Would things get a bit better if Chris found a job and moved out of this house? But even if he does find a job, it's not certain he'll start living on his own. And even if Chris leaves, I'd still be left with my mother-in-law and John. Where did I go wrong? Every day, my regrets only grow. It's not that I never considered leaving. But thoughts like what would happen to this nice house? Or wanting to fulfill my parental duties until Chris finds a job, or my pride got in the way and stopped me. I've always been serious by nature, bad at leaving things halfway done. I wish that by tomorrow, a miracle would happen, and everyone would become kind. I was seriously entertaining such fairy tale thoughts. No fairy tale happened, but a month later, an event that would shake my life occurred. Wait, your mother passed away in an accident. Hearing the shocking news from John over the phone, I couldn't help but raise my voice in the office. I was like, no way, and decided to listen to John's story more carefully once again. But, as I first heard, it seems that my mother-in-law had already passed away. It happened on her way back from shopping during the day. She was hit by a car at an intersection, the impact was fatal, and she was pronounced dead at the hospital she was transported to. Panicking at the sudden news? Even when a coworker asked, "What's wrong?" I could only respond incoherently, "No, it's nothing." I left work early that day, and John, who also came home early, discussed the funeral arrangements with me. I wonder how long it has been since John and I had a serious conversation. John was shockingly out of it the whole time, speaking in a daze. On the other hand, I hate to say it, but I didn't feel the slightest bit sad. If anything, I felt a sense of relief. Of course, I couldn't say such a thing in front of John. But seeing him so lost, I decided to take charge of arranging the funeral. Despite my difficulties with my mother-in-law, skipping the funeral was out of the question. After somehow managing the funeral arrangements, I dressed in mourning clothes and headed to the funeral hall. Officially, John, her only son, was to serve as the chief mourner. Chris was sulking and fiddling with his smartphone in the waiting room. As the time for the ceremony to start approached, John's relatives began to arrive in droves. Soon, as the attendees arrived, I became busy greeting them. As condolences came one after another. Honestly, I didn't feel sad about her passing, so I could calmly accept everyone's words. While greeting the guests, I suddenly noticed John was missing from my side. "Hey, do you know where Dad went?" Asking Chris nearby only got me a disinterested reply. How would I know? Maybe he went to the bathroom or something. As the time for the ceremony approached, everyone was seated about 10 minutes before it was due to start. Still without John returning, I headed towards the bathroom to look for him. But there was no sign of John at the bathroom, so I thought he might be in the waiting room, and just as I got there, I heard Man, I was shocked to hear Mom died, but meeting up with Lily here, it turns a sad memory into a good one. Really, that makes me so happy. About to enter the waiting room, I stopped dead in my tracks at the sound of a man and woman's conversation coming from inside. Cracking the door open a bit, I was shocked to see John and a young woman, completely naked, embracing each other. Lily, I love you. Tee-hee-hee, you say that, but you really love your wife more, don't you? The woman, called Lily, tried to coax John's true feelings out in a flirty tone. No way. She's just a housekeeper to me. I just married her because she was convenient for childcare and stuff. Who would marry someone that ugly because they liked them? Really, so now that child rearing is done, all that's left is to divorce your wife, huh?
Yeah.
Of course, wait for me, Lily. Hearing John's mocking laughter, a rage started boiling up from the pit of my stomach. What in the world is this? Was I merely existing as John's housekeeper from the very start? The horrible truth makes me feel dizzy. John, I can't be with you any longer. You'll definitely regret making me angry. I decided to record a video of John and Lily's affair through the gap in the door with my smartphone. When I started recording, the phone made a beep sound, but the two lovers seemed completely oblivious. I felt irritated by this, as I continued to record impassively with my smartphone. Despite myself, the sight of John and Lily on my phone screen continued to deeply wound my pride. After finishing my recording, I quietly closed the waiting room door and, without heading back to the funeral hall, I went straight home. By now, there might be chaos at the funeral hall since I'm missing. But this time, I just couldn't forgive what had happened. Despite my mother-in-law's death, John, her only son, was having an affair with such a young woman right before the funeral. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. Upon returning home, I furiously filled out the divorce papers I had prudently prepared for just such an occasion. After placing the completed divorce papers on the dining table, I began packing my belongings into a large suitcase. Being someone who lived by the principle of minimalism, everything I needed to take from the house where I had lived for 9 years fit into a single suitcase. Taking my most important bankbook and seal, I left the house for the last time. John called about 2 hours after the funeral had started. By that time, I had just finished moving back to my parents' house. Both of my parents were attending my mother-in-law's funeral, so I was alone at my parents' house. Ignoring John's calls, I started unpacking and secluded myself in my room. I had only informed my mother that I had run away from home due to various reasons. I had no desire to speak to John for a while, planning not to answer his calls until I felt better, but John's calls kept coming relentlessly, despite my ignoring them. I wouldn't be able to live peacefully like this. Even after my parents returned, I would have to explain about John while still feeling unsettled. Hating the thought, I reluctantly decided to answer John's call. Hello, John, do you need something from just a housekeeper? With as much sarcasm as I could muster, I began to speak into the phone. Mary, what have you been doing, skipping my mother's funeral? What were you thinking? John's frantic voice boomed in my ear, making me want to throw my phone away. But instead, I pressed it harder against my ear, determined to settle things with him. I just thought, maybe it's okay, this way, I was always treated poorly by your mother, anyway. I chose to attack indirectly, without yet revealing my certainty about having witnessed John's infidelity. What are you talking about? In what world does a wife skip her mother-in-law's funeral? And when the relatives and everyone came back home, you were gone, just a divorce paper left on the table. We were all just talking about what the hell was going on. You're making me look like a fool. John rambled on about his own conveniences, painting me as the villain in all this. Utterly appalled by John's attitude, I continued. Let me ask you, which is more disgraceful, skipping the funeral of a mother-in-law who harassed me for 9 years? Or cheating in the waiting room on the day of your mother's funeral? I voiced the damning truth loudly enough for it to echo throughout the room. As John exclaimed in surprise, I could hear whispers of affair. And what are they talking about? From John's relatives in the background. Taking a deep breath, I started speaking loudly again. Everyone, I'm truly sorry for skipping the funeral today. The reason I didn't attend is because I saw John in the waiting room at the funeral hall, cheating with a young woman. Announcing the afternoon's events boldly. My voice apparently leaked through John's phone to his relatives, causing a stir of a what, and a what does that mean? Hey, Mary, don't make stuff up and play the victim, everyone's confused, right? John retorted, trying to play it cool as if he had decided to feign ignorance. But he didn't seem to realize his voice was trembling. Making stuff up, sure, saying something like cheating at the funeral hall without any basis might not be believable. So, I'll just send the proof of the affair right now. I declared in a deliberately cheerful and firm voice. The anticipation from the relatives over the phone, watching to see how things would unfold, was palpable. I sent the video of John's affair to the chat group that included John, Chris, and the rest of the relatives. Hey, something got sent to my phone. I heard Chris's voice from the background. Swallowing nervously, I waited for everyone's reaction. What the hell is this? The first to scream was the man of the hour. Whoa, this is too messed up. Chris was utterly taken aback after seeing the video of his father with a young woman. While I did feel a bit sorry for showing Chris such an embarrassing scene of his parents, he too was a major part of the reason I suffered for so long. He's an adult now, it's only fair he faces some harsh realities. John, what have you done? An uncle's voice echoed over the phone. The women, perhaps too shocked to speak, remained silent. Here is the evidence of the affair scene in question. It's impossible to stay sane after being shown something like this. The girl looked to be in her early 20s. Hearing him call me just a housekeeper. Realizing I was merely a tool for child rearing, don't you think it's abnormal that he could calmly attend his mother's funeral? I appealed to his relatives. After hearing this, nobody dared to blame me. Instead, an uncle even showed concern. Mary, are you okay? Just hearing those words made me feel saved. This is a lie. Nowadays, videos can be easily faked with editing. You've been saying you're busy with work every day, but were you actually spending your time making this ridiculous video? Wow, that's seriously off-putting. You're the worst. John argued, far from apologizing, spinning a wild theory that the video was fake. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at this, my anger turning into amusement. Look, even if I wanted to edit it, how would I get footage of you doing this, huh? Besides, we haven't been intimate in a long time, have we? I wouldn't have such material. Your excuse seems a bit too far-fetched, doesn't it? John was at a loss for words at my retort. I could hear sighs of disbelief from the relatives in the background. Plus, you've been coming home late recently, but it wasn't because of work, was it? You were cheating with this Lily, right? I questioned John as if testing him. John quickly retorted, no, it was really because work got late. But I already knew John was lying. Oh, really? I thought you might say that, so I went to confirm with Mr. Brown, your boss. And he said, indeed, you've been leaving on time every day. Mr. Brown. The mention of his boss's name made it clear to John that what I was saying wasn't made up. He visibly showed signs of agitation. Yes, and you know, both your mother and Chris said it. They said you're just the type to have an affair. After hearing that, I decided not to attend the funeral and just leave you instead. Having poured out everything I'd been holding back, I took a moment to catch my breath. I feel so bad for you. In place of John, who had nothing to say, an uncle's sympathetic voice reached me. Encouraged by those words, I once again poured everything out. I suppose you saw it in the video. But you thought I was ugly. Yet good enough to be a housekeeper, so you married me. There was never any love from the start. And all the kindness you showed me before we got married was a lie, right? I've been used by you, your mother, and Chris, and to be honest, it's been the worst 9 years. Yet, I tried my best, thinking we're family. And this affair is what I get in return, that's why I'm done with you. Please fill out your part of the divorce papers and submit them. John, Chris, I want both of you to stay out of my life for good. I yelled from the bottom of my heart, as if it was the first time I could really say what I wanted since marrying John. Everything I said was too true for anyone to utter a word in response. Just as I was about to hang up, John finally spoke in a trembling voice. Wait, just wait a minute, divorce, can you even do that? I admit I had an affair with Lily. But it was just a moment of weakness. Look, Mom died, and I was stressed. I only love you, Mary, so please don't talk about divorce. John desperately tried to hold on to me. Not once did he offer any words of apology. John's reluctance to break up with me was probably because I earn more than he does. And he thought he couldn't live the same lifestyle without me. I couldn't believe John's selfishness, resorting to self-preservation, and I threw these words at him. Huh? Are you serious? In what world does a wife forgive her husband who's been mean for 9 years and then cheats on her? I want nothing to do with you ever again. I'll be asking for a hefty alimony, so brace yourself. Then I forcefully hung up the call. This should stop any further pathetic pleas from John. I turned off my smartphone and collapsed into bed. Now, I can part ways with that family and live a carefree life. Thinking this, tears of joy started to fall from the corners of my eyes. A few days later, John tearfully submitted the divorce papers, and I was finally free from him. The video I took of the affair was compelling evidence. And I successfully claimed thousands of dollars in damages from John and his mistress, Lily. John had been lavishing Lily with expensive brands, and now, with the mortgage on our house to pay, he was left penniless. Moreover, burdened with a massive debt, he couldn't make ends meet on his gas station job alone. Strapped for cash, John tried to take the money Chris had earned from his part-time job, which led to a father-son fight, and eventually, they cut ties completely. Chris moved out, starting life anew in a cheap, run-down apartment. However, Chris fell into bad company at university, getting hooked on gambling, such as mahjong and horse racing. Consequently, he's run out of money again and is on the verge of being kicked out by his landlord. Now, skipping college, he's working day and night in part-time jobs, desperately trying to earn back the lost money. As a result, he couldn't advance to the next grade. Moreover, since Chris was never keen on studies in the first place, he ended up dropping out of college. Considering Chris never lifted a finger to help around the house, it's easy to guess that the daily physical labor has taken a toll on his body. Well, Chris was never really a stand-up guy, so them sabotaging themselves feels quite refreshing to me. As I suspected, Lily, the mistress, was still a college senior with no plans of employment, living off seducing numerous men. So, for Lily, John wasn't the only lover but one among many men she was involved with. Thinking about how clueless John was, to be duped by Lily, and for drooling over younger women, makes me feel so disgusted it's almost nauseating. Lily, whom I sued for damages, was actually cheating with other married men as well and faced multiple claims for compensation. Since then, she has vanished from John's life, leaving him to lose Lily as well. Now, he's also working a side job as a nighttime traffic controller. But it must be nothing more than exhausting days of continuous work. It's time for him to reflect on his past misdeeds. I want John to go through hell until he has paid off every penny of the alimony debt. And when I suddenly returned home and my parents asked me why, they became furious at John after I told them the truth. Afterward, they said I could stay at home as long as I liked, so I'm living comfortably with my parents now. I think I'm done with marriage for good. Maybe a good person will come along eventually. But for now, I'm happy to be away from that dreadful family and eager to devote myself to the job I love.